Welcome to meeting number 30 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Pursuant to the order of reference of Saturday, April 11th, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. I'd like to remind the members and the witnesses, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, please unmute your microphone and then return to mute when you are finished speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly and hold the microphone for your earbuds close to your mouth if you are using earbuds, so that the translators can do their work. It is also very important that you make sure that your channel is on the appropriate language in which you are speaking. Therefore, if you are speaking English, please make sure it is on English. If you are speaking French, please make sure it is on French. As is my normal practice, I will hold up a yellow card for when you have 30 seconds left in your intervention, and I will hold up the red card for when your time for questions has expired. I would like to now welcome our witnesses. From the Université du Québec à Montréal, nous avons Magda Fusaro.
We have Magda Fusaro, Rector.
From Université du Québec en Abitibi.
From the University of Quebec Abitibi-Témiscamingue campus, we have Denis Martel, Rector.
From the University of Calgary, we have President and Vice Chancellor Ed McCauley. And from we have Matt Ratto, Associate Professor and Bell University Labs Chair in Human Interaction from the University of Toronto. And from Universities Canada, Mr. Philip Landon, Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. Each witness will present for 5 minutes, followed by a round of questions. And with that, we will start with Professor Ed McCauley, President and Vice Chancellor, University of Calgary. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the committee.
All aspects of our societies have been impacted by COVID-19. Post-secondary institutions across the country responded rapidly to ensure the success of students. At the University of Calgary, we moved 30,000 students to remote learning, brought home our students and scholars studying abroad, ensured our domestic and international students were safe, and moved over 5,000 faculty and staff to remote work where possible. This was done in a matter of days. We implemented a decade of innovation in a few weeks. At the same time, as a great research university, our faculty and students were engaged in national and international research programs to understand COVID-19 and reduce its impact on our health and our societies. We work closely with all levels of government to inform public health policy. Our spin-out companies rapidly pivoted to supply much-needed products to fight the transmission of COVID-19. And our students, themselves impacted by the pandemic, stepped up to support our community. Je suis très fier.
I am very proud of the way our students responded to the needs during the COVID-19 pandemic. They adapted, and they gave to those in need.
Grocery delivery for those who couldn't get out. They volunteered to conduct contact tracing for the provincial healthcare systems. And over 200 pre-service teachers provided free individualized online tutoring for primary and secondary students. Our staff rallied to produce supports for mental health, up to the moment information, and advice on how to deal with the day-to-day impacts of the new normal. I'm very proud of how we helped and what we accomplished. But now is the time to look beyond the immediate COVID-19 emergency and ask how we can support this generation of students and scholars and ensure Canada's future. COVID-19 has shown the crucial roles that universities play to support Canadians, which is why I'm pushing as hard as I can to ensure that we learn from this year's decade of innovation. This fall, we are adopting a hybrid model of delivery. Within public health guidelines, we want to maximize in-person interactions They're a key part of our student experience and a key component of knowledge creation and innovation. The electricity, the lifelong friendships formed, and excitement of starting a new journey are not easily replicated online. Canada needs the knowledge our universities create. The world will not be standing still, and our prosperity depends on it. Our Canadian government can help to ensure the success of students and scholars in the coming months through investments. Investing in work-integrated learning and upskilling. These are investments in Canadian productivity. Investing in research. Previous investments have paid huge dividends during COVID-19. Continuing this investment will grow and diversify the Canadian economy. Investing in technology platforms. Doing so will unlock the power of the digital world for delivering advanced education and lead to new discoveries. These are just 3 examples of many where the return on investment to Canada could be huge. Such investments will ensure that Canada is equipped to deal with the next major global calamity, because we will have the talent, creativity, and the ability to create new knowledge. As I wrap up my opening comments, I want to emphasize that the pivots over the last few months have been expensive. But we view these expenditures as vital for our students' success and the prosperity that they will bring to the future of Canada. In a world with such significant uncertainty, investment in post-secondary institutions is both an investment in our future and an investment in preparing for the next unknown. I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Si vous désirez poser...
If you wish to ask me questions in French, I will answer in English.
Thank you very much, Professor Macaulay. We'll now go to Professor Ratto. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation to testify. So I've been going through the transcripts of recent witnesses to this committee, and I was struck by recent comments by Dr. McDonald on June 1st of this year about the development of an emergency ventilator by an international team of scientists and engineers. And my goal today is to tell you a little bit, to highlight those kinds of efforts and tell you a little bit more about research that's ongoing, not just with research scientists and Nobel Prize winners, but also groups including frontline doctors, local hobbyists, students, and even Indigenous groups like the Anishinaabe Nation in Northern Ontario, who've been leveraging local know-how and digital fabrication, new technologies to produce local solutions to COVID. In the last few months, millions of face shields have been printed and laser cut. There are hundreds of different but often related ventilator projects, alternative face mask and respiratory technologies, a real groundswell of activity centered on protecting and serving the needs of frontline healthcare workers and COVID patients. Now, you probably have heard these sort of feel-good stories in the media, and they really do highlight the resiliency and capacity of Canadians. But I think they're also more than that. They also signal new capacities for innovation and technology development that sit outside the typical mechanisms and provide key capabilities to quickly problem solve and respond when industrial systems and infrastructures break down, as we recently experienced. So a little background on me, I'm a professor at U of T, and when COVID hit, I turned my attention to seeing what we might do about it. I got a little bit of money from the University of Toronto to set up what we ended up calling the Toronto Emergency Device Accelerator, and brought together a group of faculty, students, and staff to work on critical issues. Since then, we've produced about 10,000 face shields and distributed them to hospitals and long-term care facilities, supported the development of a number of hospital-centered projects, and provided essential equipment to assist in the development of a Canadian N95 mask test facility run out of the Dalla Lana School of Public Health. But really what we did is we supported what has been called community-based innovations, focused on supporting communities in need. Now, for example, the face shield project that we built was really part of an open innovation process where we built on the solutions of others and provided our own solution to others as well, using open licensing to support widespread dissemination and quick improvements rather than using patent or other IP mechanisms. Now, we could, of course, do this because we were leveraging the public infrastructure of the university and funding from this institution with the goal of having direct and immediate impact rather than generating a financial outcome. But these shields, and of course, all the others created by all the other groups, I think served a very important role in the initial months of the crisis, providing safety and protection until the regular private enterprise solutions could spool up. Now that they have, the face shields that we have made are not really competitive, costing more to make, limited by our use of university infrastructure, which has now been returned back to its main role in research and teaching. Now, these are, I think, again, a feel-good story, but they serve to illustrate my main takeaway. Within the university, we typically divide innovation up in the following way: as contributions to human knowledge that we publicly share through academic publishing, and then these other types of contributions that we typically require patent protections and are focused on economic value. But I think there's a third way that I believe the above story highlights, that are about innovations which are generated through deep and continuous collaborations with communities in need, and which require open licensing and ongoing support to have impact. And here I really want to highlight the role that Canadian universities can play, given their centralization of expertise and knowledge and their focus on the public good. So I'll just end with a couple of quick recommendations, which is I want to encourage this committee to keep this kind of innovation in mind as they deliberate on related issues, such as the new role of the College of Patent and Trademark Agents. And I also want to encourage the continued funding of research grants and other forms of funding which encourage universities and research to set up hubs, thank you, for focus not just on the creation of new private companies, but on new organizational forms to support innovations of the kinds I described above. These innovations really helped us solve a problem in this PPE emergency, and I believe it offers us a model for continuing strategic and critical capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Professor Landon. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation, and thanks for conducting this study and for the extraordinary work that all parliamentarians are doing during this very challenging time. Universities Canada, it represents Canada's 95 universities nationally, and taken as a whole, our universities are a $38 billion enterprise and are significant drivers of economic prosperity. They provide employment for over 300,000 people. They are anchor institutions in the communities, often the largest employer in the communities, and all of this while more than half of their revenues derive from non-governmental sources. I'm just going to switch to French. Les universités canadiennes font...
Canada's universities are an integral part of Team Canada's approach to the COVID-19 pandemic. From mitigating risk to finding a cure and accelerating Canada's economy into recovery. These are challenges that we all face. We appreciate the challenge now facing the government and all of us, that of restarting the Canadian economy while continuing the health measures necessary to keep COVID-19 at bay. We have also greatly appreciated the steps the government has taken to date, including the $9 billion in support measures announced for students, flexible immigration measures for international students, and funding to restart on-campus labs.
And while these measures are essential to helping young people and universities through the pandemic, I want to highlight 3 key areas today as we continue on. The first is around international students, second is around infrastructure, and the third is around research and innovation that will be vital to supporting Canada throughout through the pandemic and beyond. International students are part of the rich, diverse fabric of our institutions and their communities. They're also one of the biggest sources of revenue for Canadian universities and their communities. They contribute $22 billion to the Canadian economy, more than softwood, more than wheat, more than auto parts. This includes $6 billion in tuition revenue. With the closed borders and with the pandemic, we can anticipate significantly lower international student enrollment this fall. This loss will directly impact all students and the ability of universities to meet the needs of Canadian students. We've been working very closely with federal officials to develop supports for international students to study either online or in person, and we continue to emphasize the need to ensure that international students can continue their studies, stabilize university operations, and contribute to economic recovery. We're very keen to send a strong signal to the international community that Canada is open to international students. I should also highlight the need for federal assistance should institutions see a loss in revenue, a significant loss in revenue as a result of the drop. A direct federal transfer will help universities bridge their operations until borders are open. Furthermore, federal investments in regaining Canada's market share in key source markets for international students, along with diversifying source markets, will be important for stabilization and recovery of the sector. Around infrastructure and looking forward to our recovery from COVID, Canada's universities can be partners in accelerating our economic rebound. Les universités canadiennes ont
Canadian universities have infrastructure projects that are with shovels ready to go in the ground, worth up to $7 billion, and the majority of them are focused on building green, digitally enabled, and accessible campuses that will reduce the country's carbon emissions.
Investments in digital infrastructure in particular will rapidly expand access to post-secondary education, upskilling, and reskilling even as the country reopens. These investments will also ensure that students can attend regardless of disability, physical distance, or work or family requirements. And then finally, around research and innovation, it's a huge opportunity for economic recovery is investing in our universities in research and innovation. The time is right now to harness the cooperation of the last 5 months to build a comprehensive idea to innovation strategy. Such a strategy would leverage existing investments in research into concrete solutions for emerging national and local challenges in a post-pandemic Canada. It would include support for institutional knowledge mobilization strategies and regional innovation adoption hubs to connect university research with local needs across the country. We appreciate the work of all the members of this committee to help Canada recover from COVID-19. Thank you very much for having us here today.
Merci beaucoup. J'invite.
Thank you very much. And now I would invite representatives from the University of Quebec Network. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of Parliament, witnesses, thank you very much to have invited us and for continuing your work. It is exceptional. I will quickly give you an overview of our unique model in Canada, which is an exceptional strength to higher learning and research in Canada, in Quebec and Canada. We have 10 university institutions, all different and independent, spread out over all of Quebec, both urban and rural. We have over 1,300 programs at all 3 degree levels, over 100,000 students every year. And the accessibility to higher learning, in our view, is a fundamental value. We have students who are first-generation students, young Indigenous students, parent students, and, of course, students who come to us from the college environment. Over 50 years, we have awarded over 750,000 degrees, contributing to increasing the level of schooling and the standard of living of citizens. We have 2,700 professors who are active in all fields of knowledge. They develop niches of excellence that aim to find solutions to the major modern challenges and challenges in the context of the COVID pandemic at hand. Collectively, the network ranks first in the country for its volume of research. Our researchers develop projects rooted in the communities where they find themselves, and they work together with a diverse range of partners, community groups, cultural circles, business people, health agencies, international organizations, and of course with Canadian and international universities. Our discoveries and our innovations, be they technological, scientific, or social, contribute to Quebec and Canada's economic growth and to the well-being of all citizens. Now, I will give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Fusaro. Thank you. And so I will speak briefly and echo the examples that have been given on research across Quebec. And our institutions are formidable levers of development and innovation. We commend the Government of Canada's actions, the large sums that were allocated, and the swift actions are noteworthy. However, it is important to remain vigilant. We lament the concentration of funding in a handful of universities in the country. My colleague spoke of diversity. And so why is it that research funding was concentrated only, and we could debate about this after, I'm sure, I shouldn't say only, but mostly in the U15, as we call it, or in universities that have a faculty of medicine. It is a shame to observe this. A shame when diversity in universities makes it so that COVID is not only an epidemiological crisis, it is an economic crisis, a social crisis, among others. And you will have seen its impact on our seniors, and I could go on infinitely with its impacts. Even if our universities don't have faculties of medicine, over 100 researchers today are working on solutions. And they are from all backgrounds, all fields. And you will see in our brief in box 2 and 3 that all actions and all work done by our researchers will show you that we can not have a faculty of medicine, but we do have a significant epidemiological lab. We have a fabulous network. And our students are trained in universities that between them share not even a quarter of the funding that was allocated. I will share with you our 3 major recommendations, and we can debate them. We wish for the funds to be rebalanced. There will be more crises in the future. We want to support the government's efforts, and we want to continue to contribute to a green recovery. We will be delighted to answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Our series of questions, our rounds of questions. In our first round, we start with 6-minute questions, and I turn the floor over to MP Rempel-Gardner. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have talked to members of all parties about this, so I'll just be starting my remarks with a quick notice of motion. Today, CBC News reported that Canada's Competition Bureau is investigating Amazon's online practices in Canada because of a focus of potential abuse on dominance, and it relates to the potential treatment of their independent sellers. So I'm providing the following notice of motion that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology invite representatives from Amazon.ca or appropriate Amazon officials to appear regarding reports of anti-competitive behavior on the part of Amazon.
Madam Chair?
Yep.
Yeah, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I would ask if we could maybe quickly deal with this through unanimous consent. I have a small amendment, but I think we could get this motion passed.
Mr. Massey, unfortunately, we don't have the 48 hours notice. So Madame Rempel-Garner has given notice of the motion. So it's not admissible for debate at this time.
I think, though, that you can ask for unanimous consent to deal with the motion. And if we're granted that, then we could proceed quickly to that. I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain that was the case for procedure, unless it's different this time.
It actually does not require unanimous consent, but I can open the floor if there are any members that would like to consider or not consider this. There is now a request to deviate from the motion that was passed in February from this committee to provide 48-hour notice. And I appreciate that Madame Rempel-Garner has given us the notice of motion. I'm just going to open the floor, and if there are any members of Parliament who would like to put forth that we maintain the 48-hour notice, if they could please let me know immediately. I see Madame Rempel-Garner, Madame Lambropoulos has her hand up. Yes?
I just wanted to say I think we should keep it at 48 hours, mainly because we have our witnesses here today who are here to provide testimony, and I don't think it would be right for us to move ahead with this and take time away from them.
Okay, so with that, unfortunately, we do not have unanimous consent, Mr. Massey.
Okay, so we can't request a vote for that because this is time sensitive, and I'm kind of perplexed as to why we would show inflexibility, especially given the circumstances we have and what's presented to Canadians. So, I mean, I just hope that perhaps we could rethink that, because I would be willing to give up some of my time to deal with it. I mean, it's that critical.
Mr. Massey, there is no unanimous consent. There is a member who just mentioned that she would like to maintain the 48 hours. So unfortunately, we do not have unanimous consent.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, I will start the clock for you, Madame Rempel-Garner, for your 6 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to focus most of my questions or direct them to Dr. McCauley. It's nice to see you. And I might call you Ed, and I apologize. That said, I'm just going to start by saying and recognize that our community in Calgary has potentially experienced the pandemic in a different way and experienced an economic shift in a different way, because we were in a pretty bad spot going into the pandemic earlier this year in terms of unemployment numbers, economic downturn. You know, we've seen a lot of policy changes that were detrimental to the energy sector. And I was just wondering if you could very briefly, because I only have 5 or 6 minutes here, outline almost in bullet point format some of the challenges that the university has experienced, your asks to rectify those challenges to both the provincial and federal government, as well as any observations about how the University of Calgary has been addressing some of the needs of the broader community during this time of crisis. I know that you guys play a really important part in that, but I think just for the record, for committee purposes, if you could do that very succinctly, that would be very helpful for members to hear about that.
Thank you. Yes, undoubtedly, the combination of the COVID-19 and then the impacts on industry throughout the world and all the different sectors that are prominent in Calgary, whether it be agriculture, whether it be energy, whether it be transportation and logistics, whether it be finance, all of those things, combine to sort of really create a very major storm. What the University of Calgary tried to do right from square zero was to try to maintain as much as possible business continuity. And that business continuity included making sure that we were capable and able to conduct research to help provide solutions for the COVID-19 issue in particular, but then also support our community. I mentioned that our students stepped up amazingly. They volunteered and filled out very, very quickly the contact tracing. Our Cummings School of Medicine rapidly upskilled approximately 400 physicians locally to support Alberta during the pandemic. At the same time, we were providing evidence-based guidance and suggestions to the city, the provincial government, as well as the federal government in terms of how we can deal with the public health issues associated with COVID-19.
So Ed, I'm sorry to interrupt you because the time goes so quick. You've got about like 2 minutes. What do you need? What are you asking for? Put it on the record.
We have support for the international student clarity in terms of admission for students. I think is really, really important. We have around 4,500 students that we hope to host this year at the University of Calgary internationally. The research funding continuity is very, very important. I've been talking to my assistant professors, and their programs have been dramatically impacted. So we really appreciate the business continuity funding from the tri-councils, which is important. And once again, having the capacity to support upskilling, to support and reskilling, to support the Calgary community would be very, very beneficial at this time. And again, what I mentioned earlier, technology development and platform development for advanced education and for research would be very, very generous and beneficial.
I'll just close with another question to you, Dr. McCauley. I've gotten a few queries from students, and I think that this is a topic of discussion across the country, saying like, look, our studies were disrupted this year. We didn't have online classes. What's the deal with tuition? How are we going to get our educations? Do you have anything to just say to them or best practice on how to universities in Canada could go forward, and what are your needs from the federal government with regard to facilitating both?
First of all, we've worked very, very closely with our students, both our undergraduates and our graduate students, to ensure continuity for their programs. We've discussed tuition aspects with them. Our professors and our staff are delivering the same quality of materials in different formats. And in addition, we work closely with students to say, if we're not offering this service, then those fees have been relaxed. On the piece around, I mentioned business continuity, our graduate students are very, very important for the future of Canada, and continued funding for graduate students whose research programs have been interrupted would be very beneficial from the federal government.
So I just want to take the opportunity with the time I have left, Madam Chair, to thank you, Dr. McCauley, and the entire team at the University of Calgary for doing your best and punching above your weight during this crisis, both from a research perspective and looking for ways to support our community during an economic crisis. And I hope that all my colleagues on this committee would look to your institution as a way to assist Alberta through the economic crisis and during the pandemic. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to MP Lambropoulos. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being with us today. I have a few questions for several different witnesses. I guess the first question that I'm going to ask is for Mr. London, University of Canada. You mentioned that obviously the international student community is one that is very important to us. It's great revenue for the universities and for our GDP. And I would just like to know what is the reason? Have you noticed a decrease in enrollment for the upcoming term and for the upcoming year? And what exactly is the reason? Considering that most universities, or many of them, have said that they will be going online for the fall and winter semesters, what do you believe the reason is for this decrease in enrollment from international students who could very well take the courses from their home countries?
Thanks very much for that question. And the hard data on enrollment is still in flux. We'll probably know in October, I would think, at institutions across the country as to how much of a hit there's been. But the fact is, right now, if I'm a student looking to come to Canada for the first time from China, I don't actually have a clear pathway to come. I do have a pathway to study online, which is good, but international students want to come to Canada. That's part of why they study here, and that's what they contribute to our classrooms, and then often to our communities as time goes on. So there's been a little lack of clarity around that and around the openness. I do understand that the Public Health Agency of Canada is now working with the ministries of health in the provinces and territories to ensure that the universities have the right protocols in place, and the universities do. And we're really looking for a strong signal that students will be able to come back not only for this semester, but actually for January semester as students come in. And as I outlined in my testimony to begin with, this is a huge part of universities' revenues, and it's a huge part of what we do as Canada, and it's a huge part of our future to be open to international students. And so,
Thank you.
So we should see.
So if I understand correctly, you're asking for some leeway as well with regards to giving access to international students who have proof of enrollment to coming across the borders now that they're currently closed. Correct. As I understand it right now, they still have to have a letter to say why they must come across, and that's being interpreted by border officers in different ways, and that is if they have a student permit from before March 18th. So we're looking for clarity on that, and we know that our universities are ready to accept them, and they have quarantine measures in place, and it's part of our competitive advantage internationally to be able to welcome international students back to our campuses at this time. Okay, thank you very much. As many of you have mentioned, your universities played a vital role in helping communities across the country come up with solutions to COVID-19, some more vulnerable communities in some cases. And I guess I was wondering I feel that there's often a disconnect between our universities and our businesses, or a disconnect between the universities and actually being able to reach the community level. Do you have any suggestions with how the Government of Canada can help maybe bridge the gap that exists there between the two? That question goes to any of the witnesses that wish to answer. And I think Mr. Rado had mentioned something along these lines.
Yes. Thank you very much for that question. I think you're right. I think there's often a disconnect. We've seen that disconnect, though, be sort of brought back together, particularly with groups that have community-focused research. So we've seen it in education, we've seen it in social work, where community-based research has served to basically make the university provide a valuable role in those contexts. I think community-based innovation can serve a similar purpose, with the goal not necessarily being the creation of new pedagogies or forms of social work, but actually through the creation of technologies and other systems that can actually provide direct benefits. Sometimes that sits outside the standard mechanisms of business, and that's why I focused my attention on the creation of alternative organizational forms and alternative forms of support for bridging that gap through the use of technology.
Mr. McCauley, I believe you had also mentioned something about that, if you would like to chime in and give recommendations.
Yeah, the first piece is on, once again, dealing with the COVID-19 emergency and making sure that the most needed in society, we're gaining access to resources. I think what we're going to find with COVID-19, and we're already seeing it, is the impact of the changes in life are really going to have an impact on mental health, which we have really tried to invest significantly in to try to provide those supports necessary for the community. We have also been working closely with businesses and with industry, providing public health advice as to how they can reopen, how they can restart, and how they can maintain business continuity. I also like to support Professor Rado's comments about use-inspired research. Universities across the country do that and invest in that really, really significantly. And that means that the knowledge we create can be mobilized quite quickly for the benefit of society.
That's my time, so thank you very much.
Donc, j'invite maintenant des...
Now, MP Lemire has 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Chair, rather. And also thank you to my colleagues for having wanted to continue this study. I'm looking into supporting research, something very important to me. Today, it's August 14th. Mr. Martel is the current rector, and he remembers what that date means. My father was Secretary General of the University of Quebec 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, on August 14th, I was in a chalet working on a piece that he had done for his children. August 13th, the previous day, the university was paying homage to him. And Mr. Martel, I just wanted to highlight your own personal contribution and the contribution of the president of the University of Quebec network. All of that is very fresh and clear in my memory. Now, my first question, which is, of course, for our representative from UQAT, University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. What is the role that a university plays in a region that is so unique as Abitibi-Témiscamingue? Answer. Thank you, Mr. Lemire. And yes, you reminded me of very fond memories and a great man. I think that the real role is the following, and I say this often. Our university is in the heart of our region and is an important player because it is a designer. It plays the role of bringing groups together. It plays a role of a motivator. We have highly skilled staff. We attract students. We attract knowledge, and we develop the social sector. It has an essential role to play in our region. Question. And it's easy to see that this role that it plays in the development of a region is not taken into consideration when it comes to research funding. And I sincerely believe that it would fully behoove us to rebalance funds for fundamental research. 15 large universities soak up almost all of the funds, and I think that we should rebalance this and send more funds to regions like your region. I think that it's in the government's interest to support your universities for the economic recovery. This money can be used to support internships for students and businesses, salaries for staff, and this is important for provinces too, because education is under provincial jurisdiction. What do you think should be done to change the federal funding? Answer. In our brief, we gave a few examples, actually, and we made a number of recommendations. My colleague said it very well. There are about 100 universities in Canada. And if 56% or more of funding is concentrated on a handful of universities, other universities are penalized because it is difficult to train new people. It is difficult to attract researchers who want a great career. So there should be more balance for all universities. That's fundamental. We can't go without expertise at our universities. Excellence has no address, as someone once said. Excellence exists at all universities, and it is a shame to go without expertise at our universities, and we have to find a way to help all universities contribute more. Question. And there should perhaps even be a fund for regional consultation so that knowledge is better shared, theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge, to help contribute to problems in the region, including environmental and other issues. I'd like to bring something else up, which is important to the COVID context. International students. We know that the University of Quebec welcomes many international students. What does this mean for your financial situation if you can't welcome international students to Abitibi-Témiscamingue? And what can the provincial, but especially federal government do to help you be able to host students or to be able to make up for that shortfall if you can't host them? Answer. Well, we received funding from the provincial government, and any funding we receive will have an even greater impact in the future. We must be able to host international students. The main impact is that all of Canada runs the risk of missing out on these brilliant brains in innovation in Canada. There are certain sectors that work more in natural resources. And this type of sector must bring its students physically to on-site. And so we must enable an opening of the borders so that we can welcome those international students. Thank you very much, Mr. Martel.
Thank you very much. We now go to MP Massey. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And real briefly, just with regards to the start of the meeting, I wanted to be clear that the NDP support this excellent motion that's presented for us to consider in future business. The reason being, I want to do a small amendment. I'm just going to read it briefly so people know where we're coming from. Just to add third-party sellers on the Amazon marketplace or those formerly on it and consumer organizations. Being from Windsor, we watch the United States very carefully, and the U.S. lawmakers have been going after a number of issues related to Amazon, and I'm simply tired of Canada being treated as a colony by some of these organizations, and this is an opportunity that we should do, and I'm sorry we missed it this time, but looking forward to that. Now with that, Madam Chair, to our excellent witness panel here, I am interested. I'm going to go to Mr. Ratto first, if I could, please. You gave a great example of production of real goods and services from the university that get to our streets. I thought that was excellent because where I'm from, the University of Windsor has been doing that in a variety of ways, everything from the automotive sector to a whole series of science and health products and so forth. That was before COVID-19, part of our culture here. But I do want you to maybe mention or at least highlight some of the patent barriers that you might have and some of the intellectual property barriers that you might have. This committee has studied some of those in the past, but perhaps you can shine a light on how those things can maybe be altered, especially during emergencies, or how they can be refined for more open research to help these types of initiatives that you should be quite proud, and I'm sure are quite proud of.
Well, thank you very much. That's a great question. You know, I'm often very concerned and focused on IP, not necessarily for the same reasons that you just mentioned. Within the university, I think we have a tendency to really see intellectual property as one of the primary ways that we create value. So through the production of ideas that are then patented or somehow have some type of IP protection, and then that gives us the capacity to exchange those or sell those out to industry. What I've actually been seeing during this COVID period is people choosing the alternative path, choosing not to patent, choosing not to copyright even their inventions. We saw you saw this in this committee with Dr. McDonald talking about the lack of patenting of the ventilator. The issue here is not so much that people may not have a freedom to operate, that they may be restricted by patent, but they may be restricted by their own institutions who may not understand how to value the results that they have created unless there is somehow intellectual property involved. You know, it's quite interesting that IP is often valued in the same way that, say, a published article might be valued in the university. That's a great way for people to kind of pad out their CV. But what do you do if what you're creating really results in neither one of those two things, but has real impact in the world? How do you navigate that? And I think that's actually a bigger restriction. And in a series of interviews that I've done with people who've been participating with my own little group, my Toronto Emergency Device Accelerator, this has been highlighted as a real issue for them, that they've taken time out of their normal work, their normal research to try to have a real impact. And now they're sort of looking, well, you know, what has this really done to my career? So I find that very sad that that's the case.
Yeah, it's a missed opportunity in many respects. I'm going to have to switch quickly to Mr. Landon to get you in this conversation for, I think an important issue is that you mentioned that there's quarantine capabilities available by universities for foreign students coming in. But I think it's important for maybe you to articulate the, I guess, the plan in place in case people get sick. Here in Windsor, the government allowed migrant workers to come in with a plan that was altered, allowing them a 3-year-old business plan to be submitted. They didn't do on-site inspection. It shut down us to stage 2 for a long period of time, and it caused the death of 3 workers, and many more are actually in hotels right now held up because they got sick coming into Canada, not coming into Canada. They were healthy when they got here, and now they're sick. What can you say about that situation? Because that's a real significant problem that had not only just a humanitarian aspect with regards to the death of individuals, but also consequences for the entire economy as we were left out of moving through the different stages.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's an absolutely tragic event. And I guess it is a lesson learned for the universities, but also for the local health authorities, the provincial health authorities, and the feds on how to make sure that the quarantine works, but also that the protocols are in place. And so that's what's happening right now in consultation with local health authorities and the institutions to ensure that what happened with temporary foreign workers doesn't happen with students, and we've got the right people at the local health authorities working with the right people at the universities.
But do you have everything from translation and education services for different cultures coming in? Do they have personal insurance for healthcare? And also, is there communications, thank you, Madam Chair, with the services in case they do get sick, they aren't overwhelmed?
Yes, I mean, very briefly, and I can't speak on behalf of all of the universities and what plans they have in place, but those are the plans that they are putting in place now to ensure that that type of event doesn't happen with international students.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move into round 2 questions. Our first round of questions goes to MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's indeed an honor to have the witnesses here today and to talk about some of the issues that are so important to such a large sector of our society. Of course, the type of education that you're going to be offering in the fall and into next year is going to be quite different thanks to COVID-19. And students are going to be asked to take courses online, which many regard as a substandard learning experience, especially when it comes to labs and hands-on courses. I know I've spoken to many students that were excited about going to university this year, and they were so disappointed that this method of learning is going to be their new reality, so much so that some of them are considering waiting for a year in order to be out of the system until things get sorted out. And I think that's really, as perhaps you might have heard as the different MPs tried to get onto this virtual meeting today, the concerns that we have with broadband access and so on. And those Canadians that are living in rural Canada, they don't have the adequate broadband access to the internet, so they're almost looking at a 2-tier education system whereby some students will have full access to courses and all of the things that entails, while others are left out of the higher education system almost completely. So my question is whether the universities have put in plans or have any plans to address this particular issue. How will you be able to provide universal access to higher education if students have enrolled in your courses and they find out that it just can't work for them? Will you have the flexibility to be able to offer them a refund or to allow them to come back in at a later time? Perhaps if I could go to Universities Canada first.
Thanks very much for that question, and I think it may be helpful for the other members to respond specifically with what's going on. Certainly, when we put 1.4 million students online in a period of 3 weeks in March, and as Dr. McCauley referred to it, the innovation of 10 years within a year. It was to finish up the last semester and to get students through, and our universities did that admirably. There is a lot of work to do to improve the level of digital and online learning, and particularly, as you point out, the accessibility requirements so that everyone is getting the same opportunity for learning. The universities across country have been working all summer through a variety of ways, and in most cases, in fact, is spending extra money and extra time to develop more innovative ways, more accessible ways. This is sort of the number one priority on the campuses across Canada: is how do we make sure that the learning, the distance learning, the online learning opportunity is of a scale and of a level which will keep the great learning that happens at our universities.
Well,
But it might be helpful if someone answers
thank you. Well, I'll thank you very much, but I will go to Dr. McCauley. If you could address that. I mean, I was a high school math and physics teacher for 34 years. I was involved with distributed learning and different types of things. There are students that excel in that particular platform, and there are others that are completely lost. And the other aspect of it is it isn't so much, a lot of it has to do with the technology and so on, but you have to train your instructors in order to figure out how to make this work effectively. And I think that's one thing, we talk about, let's make sure there's a machine out there for a student, but you have to make sure that your instructors are properly trained so that they actually can keep that motivation, can keep the engagement. So what types of things have been done to assist in the distribution of learning from the instructor's point of view?
That's a really, really good question. I mentioned that we pivoted very quickly during the winter term. That was done in a period of around 4 or 5 days. And we allocated resources to faculty to help them pivot and get their courses online. We also were completely online during spring, summer because of COVID-19. And so our Taylor Institute for Teaching and Learning actually provided resources to individual faculty members who wanted to further develop their courses. And actually enrollment is increased in the spring, summer session because of that. So we're taking those learnings as much as possible and using them going forward for the fall term. But as I mentioned, we want to be as open as possible in the fall term just because of the hands-on practices you were talking about. So we estimate that we'll have over 10,000 students on our campuses in small class settings, person-to-person interactions. And we've done a complete analysis with the public health system as to how we can actually accommodate that. So we'll be looking very, very carefully at making sure that the student quality and the quality of instruction is there for distributed learning as well as in person.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now go to MP Longfield. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Dreeshen covered a few of my questions off, but I want to go back to Mr. Landon just on maybe a little bit of a different ask on the question. I met with the CSA group from University of Guelph this past week and listened to them about their concerns as students returning in the fall. We had undergrad as well as grad students, and there's much there's much in common, but there are some real differences with undergrad and grad students, especially where grad students have family or they have to find housing, and they've got challenges around some of the costs in terms of having their family with them as they go through their education. They talked about tuition costs and no change in cost of tuition, even though there's change in delivery of material, challenges communicating with supervisors and professors, looking at rural students, as Mr. Dreeshen mentioned, poor connectivity, socioeconomic status, that not everybody can afford the electronics to study, limited access to mandatory and paid for student resources. It's like they don't have access to the library, but they're still paying for library resources. Has college or has the University of Canada been working with student groups? Do you have a working group that's looking at the impacts from a student's point of view on how COVID has impacted on their lives, and how universities are working to provide them opportunities going forward?
Thanks for the question. And we don't have a working group, but we stay in close contact with student associations and their national representatives on this and on a number of other issues. And I think, in many ways, the short answer is that we've got, close to 100 institutions who are doing their best at the moment. And sometimes it may not be what the students are looking for, but they're working towards that. And the universities listen to their students as well. I think the crux of the matter is that the cost to the university remains the same. In fact, the cost to the university is increased. The building maintenance costs, the staffing costs, and now the added cost of new design is increased. So what universities across the country are doing is working to get the best possible online experience, with the hope that we'll be able to get students back, start students coming back as soon as September, but start to move into an on-campus environment as soon as possible, because that's actually what makes our university so great.
Great, thank you. And my next question for the University du Québec at Montreal, looking at as was just mentioned by Mr. Landon, the cost of running the university. We have support staff, we've got cleaning staff, we've got unionized in different sectors, and we've got the professors themselves, the researchers, most of which are funded through the provincial funding models. How can the federal government support universities in terms of the wages and the cost of operation from the wages of the staff? I'm directing it to Quebec, but if Mr. Landon or anybody else wants to chime in, that would be helpful as well.
Merci d'avoir posé la question.
Thank you for asking the question. There are a number of ways to achieve that. First, for operating costs, it's true that there are a wide range of varieties of employees. The employees who are not professors are paid thanks to tuition fees, largely. And when it comes to enrollment, and or rather when it comes to research, when it comes to universities of Quebec, especially my campus in Montreal, those are federally funded. You would be shocked to see how many researchers at UQAM that are federally funded. There are ways to support research with programs that are a little different for emerging researchers, for postdoc researchers. We were talking about international students, and I looked at the numbers while you were discussing. For all 3 degree levels, our international student levels are increasing. So in all 3 degree levels, we will have more enrollments by international students than in the past. Almost 500 new international students.
Thank you. That helps to get the complexity into our report. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We now go to MP Gray.
Merci.
You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start my questions with Mr. Landon of Universities Canada. So since COVID-19 is taking most students out of their physical classrooms, have you heard of, with all the universities that you represent, if they're looking at increasing their class sizes due to the fact that they might have been restricted previously due to, classroom physical limitations?
That's a very good question, and I would say that I actually haven't heard that, but that's yeah, very interesting. Perhaps some of my colleagues have, but I have not heard that at all.
Okay, I'll just go on with a couple other questions here. Based on, now of course this might be different for each university, but as an average going across the country, what is the average percentage in tuition that comes from international students?
I don't have the number right in front of me, and it does vary, but it is upwards of 20%.
Okay, and Mr. Landon, with a lot of international students not potentially entering Canada this year, as you had mentioned in your early remarks, are you seeing universities substituting this with domestic enrollments then instead, since they might be losing some of those international enrollments? Are you hearing that universities would be substituting those spaces with domestic students instead?
Yeah, it's never really been a trade-off like that. What we have heard from that enrollments for domestic students are looking similar to previous years, so that's very good news. But it's not been a situation where universities are denying domestic students in order to take international students. In fact, they've been growing to be able to teach both.
Okay, well, if you sort of look at it where there may not be potentially as many international students going into this fall, do you know if universities, have you heard if any of them might be amending their admission requirements to allow for more domestic students to actually fill, to bring up their capacity, which would also increase some of their revenue as well?
I haven't heard that in terms of universities changing. I think the market is usually that as the admissions requirements are there and the top students are able to get in, if there's less competition, more students will be able to get in. But I haven't heard of that being an issue or a strategy across the country.
Okay. We did hear today that there were increased costs, a lot due to technology. And of course, that's with everyone. Doesn't matter whether you're in business or in this type of work. So everyone has had to increase their costs with technology and sanitation and all kinds of different issues with COVID-19. So have you had conversations, or are you hearing about the reduction in costs on the campuses that would be related to not having as many students or faculty there on a daily basis?
There certainly have been reductions in costs across the community, and there have been layoffs as a result, and so it's been a tough time at many of our campuses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now have you heard, we did hear a lot today around research dollars and some of the good work that's being done. Have you heard of if some of the research funding that's been coming in, is it fairly consistent? Has it been increasing? Has it been decreasing during this time, or moving forward? Are you getting any sense looking forward for that?
So there may be others who are better placed to speak to me. The Canadian government has added to the research fund in terms of looking for COVID-19 strategies. That's been very helpful, and in many cases, sort of timelines have been extended, and that's been very helpful as well.
Okay. Lastly here, just a last quick question. When it comes to students in a lot of fields that we've seen are important during this time, especially with nursing and in sciences and supply chain management, have you heard of some universities changing their models to really address some of these other sectors that we've seen have really risen during this time and where there's a greater need?
Yes, I think so. I think the other witnesses have given examples of how universities have pivoted quite well to address the needs of the community, and the links between the community and the universities have never been stronger as a result of that.
Thank you very much. We now go to MP Johari. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses. I may be experiencing some technical difficulty. Can I first confirm that I can be heard? Yes, great, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to ask each one of the witnesses on a different aspect of the international students. I do understand that there's been accommodation made for the new applicants to be able to participate online. However, I'm getting a lot of feedback, and our office is getting a lot of feedback of the existing international students that reside in Canada, that they're either engaged in post-secondary, i.e. masters and doc, postdoc, and some of them in the let's say their first 4 years. What we are hearing is that they are having problem with sourcing finance from their homeland. Therefore, they are having a lot of issues being able to find accommodation to live, being able to pay for their books, be able to pay for food, and also for their education. So what is happening is now they're under a lot of stress to be able to first and foremost pay their education, and they put that first. So they're making compromises in other aspects of their life, such as now living up to 4 or 5 or 6 people in a single room, or being, sharing some books, or, having to compromise not being able to do their studies. My question to each one of the witnesses is that how can the university help these international students, and how can the federal government partner with universities to help these international students to be able to get through this? And I've also collected some information, some suggestion from them that I'll be gladly sharing. So if I may start with Mr. Landon from Universities Canada, can you share your thoughts with us how we can manage this challenge?
Thanks very much, and happy to. The hope had been when the Canada Emergency Student Bursary was available that it would be made available to international students, and it wasn't. And so they have fallen between the cracks in terms of emergency support during the pandemic. Universities do have funds and means of supporting students in need, but those are being severely tested right now. And so I think as you speak with the presidents and rectors from the universities, they can talk about how each campus is trying to deal with this issue.
Okay, let's go to Dr. McCauley. How's your university? How can your university help, and how can the federal government help?
Thank you very much. Yes, we have around 2,500 continuing international students, many of whom decided to continue their studies during COVID-19 because they wanted to advance. I haven't heard about any specific cases coming to our office about hardship around the international students in particular. But as Philip Lang mentioned, we have many different approaches at the University of Calgary to deal with students in need, including mental health supports and economic supports and so on. I think one of the pieces that is important for the federal government is that through research funding, in the continuity of research funding, many students, international students, particularly graduate students, are supported through grants and through scholarships, and that support is really beneficial for their ongoing subsistence, to supplement what they get through the universities in teaching and so on.
Let's go quickly to University of Quebec because there are some recommendations made that I'd like to share and put on record. Mr. Martin.
Well, one thing is clear. In a small region like mine, 500 international students is quite a big number. And university has put into place measures to help those students. And the regional community is responding pretty well to be able to help those students. The federal government could certainly help by transferring perhaps certain funds into community organizations in the region that are there to support those students. That could be one possible solution.
I got about 10 seconds to go. Can the universities kindly consider using some of their excess capacity as it relates to their residence, which is empty right now, to help these students, as well as considering that they provide extension to the international student over 1 or 2 term as it relates to their tuition with the commitment that they will pay, because their families are also suffering as a result of COVID-19. And I thank Madam Chair for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that is your time. We will now go to Député Simard. Vous avez la parole.
MP Simard, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. My question is for Ms. Fusaro. In your presentation, unless I'm mistaken, you spoke about 3 measures or 3 recommendations that could be put into place to better support the University of Quebec network in the crisis. Could you speak about that? Answer. Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, the first measure in our brief that we submitted would be to invest in consultation and research partnerships. That for research, it's partnerships, especially with companies. Universities work so much together with companies. So it's important to support initiatives that are inter-university and inter-partnership. That's very important. The second measure was programs. I mentioned research. And in fact, the federal government has concentrated funding to certain universities, and that causes damages for all of Canada. My colleague, Mr. Martel, spoke about the damages in his region, but I could tell you about the damages in Montreal as well. Diversity is key, and that's what the report that I mentioned showed, to have optimum benefits for all of Canada. I don't necessarily mean investing millions more, but to better balance funding into innovative and emerging teams. It's always the same teams that get the funding. That's what we meant when we said that it's concentrated. We want it to be more diversified and to give sums to everyone. And a question was posed earlier regarding partnerships with communities. We collaborate very much with communities. Communities innovate hand in hand with universities. And the third recommendation was the digital aspect. There are still zones in Canada where access to different types of resources is difficult. And so expanding digitally is something that I think would be worthwhile. And we spoke about students who are studying by distance, but there are many students who are physically present, and that can also have digital needs when the students are there.
Of questions is for our next round of questions is for Mr. Massé. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to continue, if I could, just with Mr. Landon to get an overall sense of where universities are with regards to critical needs for infrastructure and a green economy. The other thing too is housing. Is there an inventory list, like with perhaps not as many students returning? My daughter is actually at NASCAD, and she's staying there because it's don't want to fly back and so forth, and a series of other decisions to just be safer there. But I know that some of her classmates are staying, some will be coming back, but it'll be less. Is there an opportunity here for, say, for example, maybe older residences and other living accommodations that may not be higher to standard that could be either enhanced, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, safer living quarters designed for future challenges like this one? Because we could have obviously this extended further, or we could have a similar scenario evolve that we don't expect. So is there an opportunity here with a reduced population to perhaps seize that and do some bold, innovative improvements for our universities on campus or just around campus with facilities?
Yes, there absolutely is, and I think I referenced in my opening remarks that our universities have $7 billion in shovel-ready projects. The last time there was an infrastructure fund a few years ago, we were able to build the infrastructure and the green infrastructure in 3 years in a timely and in a manner which actually upgraded our universities. Helpful now as we go digital, helpful now as we think about older buildings that have suffered from deferred maintenance, that now would be a very good time to be able to invest in these for energy efficiency, for refurbishing, for green infrastructure. Our universities are very much ready and need this funding to be able to move further into the 21st century.
Thank you. And I know, Madam Chair, you just got yellow carded and I don't want to get red carded. So thank you.
Sorry about that. I hate doing that. We will go now to our third round of questions, and our first round goes to MP Patzer. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I begin, I'm just going to move my motion from last meeting that as part of its study on the Canadian response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology invite Daniel Therrien, Privacy Commissioner of Canada, to testify regarding the development and ongoing operation of the recently released contact tracing application.
So we have a motion on the floor, and I will now open the floor to debate. I see MP Erskine Smith has his hand up.
Hi there. Yes, if this works, my connection might cut out. But the one amendment that I would like to see is to replace the language of contact tracing with exposure notification, because it isn't in fact a contact tracing app, it's an exposure notification app. So I would move that we replace the words contact tracing with exposure notification, just to be clear and precise.
Okay, now we have an amendment on the floor, so I open up debate to the amendment. Mr. Passer?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly that I'm fine with that. I think that's good.
Any further debate on the amendment? No. Okay, therefore, we'll call a recorded division for the amendment on the motion. I will turn it over to the clerk.
Can you read the one more last time, please?
Certainly. So in English, that as part of the study on the Canadian response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology invite Daniel Terrien, Privacy Commissioner of Canada, to testify regarding the development and ongoing operation of the recently released, and I'm going to check with, I don't have the exact wording with that, Mr. Erskine Smith. It was not contact tracing, but it was the
Exposure notification.
Thank you. Exposure notification application. I will now turn it over to the clerk for the recorded division.
Okay, Mr. Erskine Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Lambropoulos.
In favor.
Mr. Jahouri.
In support.
Mr. Essasi.
Yes.
Mr. Longfield.
Yes.
Ms. Rempel-Garner.
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Yes.
Ms. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Patzer.
Yes.
Monsieur Lemire.
Oui.
Mr.
Yes.
Oui.
Yes.
Perfect. I declare the amendment to the motion carried. And I believe we have to dispose of the original motion. So I'm going to turn to the clerk to call the recorded division on the original motion as amended.
Thank you. Mr. Erskine Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Lambropoulos.
Yes.
Mr. Jahouri.
Yes.
Mr. Essasi.
Yes.
Mr. Longfield.
Yes.
Ms. Rempel-Garner.
Yes.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Yes.
Ms. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Patzer.
Yes.
Monsieur Lemire.
Mr. Lemire? Yes. Sorry. There's a little delay with interpretation, so I didn't hear my name. Et Monsieur Massé? Oui.
Ayes, 0 nays.
Perfect. I now declare the motion carried. And with that, Mr. Passer, I will turn the floor back over to you for your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you everybody for your patience while we dealt with that quickly. I will begin with Mr. Landon. Yeah, we don't have any representatives for students here today, but I still want to ask about the government's support for Canadian students. The Canadian Federation of Students has launched a petition which states the $912 million Canada Student Service Grant was flawed from the start. They strongly criticize its practicality and usefulness for students. So my first question would be, did the federal government consult with any universities about the value of this program?
So I'm not aware of any consultation.
Okay, was this an idea, do you think, that universities or students would have considered or proposed on their own?
Quite possibly, yeah. I think the idea of having students be recognized for the work that they're doing in volunteering would be something that students might be putting forward. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, one of the reasons why I'm asking this, right? I mean, we already have a program called the Canada Summer Jobs Program, right? And in my riding specifically, there were more businesses and groups who did not receive funding for it than did, which means that there was more students who were not hired than who were hired to work jobs for these various businesses here. So just wondering, would pre-existing programs such as Canada Summer Jobs or some other arrangement work better for helping students who are impacted by COVID continue their studies?
I believe that what the government was looking at was a variety of measures to try and address the challenges for students across the board. I think a number of them were added to. The CESB was very helpful for students. It's hard for me to comment on the appropriateness of one over the other.
Okay. Yeah. Well, how big of a concern for a lot of students is getting a job, a big concern for a lot of students is getting a job after they graduate. So how much has COVID limited the job market for potential university graduates?
That is a real live question, and I think what you've got to look at is the macroeconomic figures for the entire economy. I think job challenges is going to be the same for students, new graduates, and perhaps more than it is across the economy. That's why we're very keen on upskilling and reskilling for students and graduates and long-term Canadians who are looking to sort of pivot their education to the new economy as time goes on, and we think there's a number of measures that could help towards that.
Do you want to elaborate on any of those measures specifically, or?
Sure. There's one of the things that we're looking for is to be able to provide funding for universities as they adapt their programming to new needs. So we're seeing that there's real areas of opportunity in cybersecurity, in communications, and in healthcare, and we want to make sure that our universities are prepared and equipped to offer that quickly to students and graduates as it becomes available.
Do you find that the broadband available to universities is sufficient enough to move to more e-learning, more online learning, or even just on campus, just the experience as we do move to a more enhanced digital experience?
Like the literal broadband, not a figurative broadband. Absolutely, yeah. We all need more broadband, and we need more broadband in our rural communities as well. I think that's absolutely essential for the country.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So are you or your members planning for how the economy is likely to shift during and after COVID, and more so, like, how does it look for lines of work which require post-secondary education?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing some thinking right now as to what the coming 10 years is going to look like. A lot of the values of the university remain there: critical thinking, research, innovation, building the leaders for tomorrow. But some of the actual job markets that come out of that are changing and shifting, and the universities are all looking as to how to build back better from this pandemic.
Okay. And just quickly, how do the restrictions of Canadian universities' campuses compare to those in the U.S. or in other countries?
It's a little difficult for me to comment on that. I think I would say that our universities, like our country, have taken a prudent approach, a careful approach, and a data-driven, science-first, health-first approach, probably more so compared to those to the south of us. With European countries, I'm not as sure.
Okay, thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, MP Patzer. And our next round of questions goes to MP Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First, I just wanted to note, in light of today's news, I think it's interesting that the Competition Bureau is investigating, only because in June of 2019, our International Committee on Big Data and Privacy, joined by parliamentarians from other countries, we did have Amazon attend before us, and we put questions to them. I remember Raj Saini asked probably the most pointed questions on competition issues of Amazon at the time. And so it's interesting that the Competition Bureau is undertaken, and I think it's a useful thing for this committee to look at, and maybe broadly look at maybe strengthening our competition laws along the way in light of recent meetings. My first question is in relation to IP strategy, actually. On May 24th, Natalie Rafool and Jim Hinton wrote in the Globe, Canadians are picking up the tab for foreign companies' research that's a familiar and systemic problem, especially for strategically valuable technologies such as 5G and AI. One example they noted was public funding via Dalhousie University, where experts contributed a slew of patented inventions that are the basis for Tesla's new million-mile battery. And they point to what they call a unique disease, but I'm interested in Mr. Langdon's view of this, but the propensity for Canadian taxpayers to fund and create ideas that other countries commercialize, and whether, I know much of this work is ultimately provincial, and the provincial government of Ontario has taken some steps recently, but I wonder if you would have any view of federal steps that could be taken on this subject matter.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's a pretty complex ecosystem. How Canadian universities use IP strategies and the policies. We have examples on campuses of those where the IP rests with the creator, with the student or the faculty member, and we have examples where it rests with the institution. And I think there are sort of pluses and minuses in each case for those as to how that then gets translated into eventually how the IP gets translated into value. One of the things that we're really looking for is that there's more support for knowledge mobilization in Canada. We're not doing as good a job of this as we can, taking the IP, taking the ideas, and then translating that into the local communities and into the local economy. So we're pushing that we have a knowledge mobilization fund, similar to something they're doing in the UK right now, which will help Canadian universities to work closely with their sort of local market, both the social and the economic market, so that they can translate the work into viable products and the betterment of the economy. So some of the other rectors and presidents may want to answer around the specifics of IP policy on their campuses.
Well, I guess I in light of those comments where there are different strategies within different universities, and then obviously you've referenced the UK, I'd maybe put it to each one of you, and maybe starting with Mr. Martel and then Mr. Macaulay and then Mr. Landon. Within Canada, what would you identify as a best practice that you would like to see federal and provincial governments work together to make the best practice and standard? And internationally, would you identify a best practice for us to look to as well?
Maybe I could begin. As Philip mentioned, the ecosystem is really, really complex at all our institutions. At the University of Calgary, we have an inventor-owned IP policy because that encourages innovation. And what we try to do as a university is to try to put those support mechanisms to enable individual scholars, whether it be students, faculty, or staff who've got ideas, to mobilize that as quickly as possible. So I think it's a combination of the IP, but also then getting the innovation ecosystem in place to actually support that, with encouraging incentives to attract capital to move these ideas forward, whether they be for profit or not for profit.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
Wait.
Yes. I believe that the current system needs to be revised in large part, at least in Quebec, but also elsewhere in Canada. I think that IP is a complex issue, and depending on sectors. We talk about technological innovation in biomedicine, for one example. I think the model should be more flexible based on the sector. And I would like to intervene. There were reforms to the copyright law, the Copyright Act. The federal government could look into that. Universities wrote briefs and contributed to that. So looking back into copyright would be one thing, because that work was not completed.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. We now go to MP Gray. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question that I'd like to pose to all of our witnesses here today. And so, one of the issues that I've heard from a number of students in my riding is the issue of mental health and also socialization, and how learning from home and being away from the classroom environment with their peers, as well as reduced extracurricular activities, may affect their ability to succeed. And so I'd like to ask what steps and actions have all of the witnesses here today with their respective institutions, what they've undertaken to help students with their mental health and also connection socially during this pandemic and moving forward. And so maybe we'll start with Ms. Fusaro to start.
Merci. Thank you. That is an excellent question. In fact, we multiplied everything that we were already doing with tutoring and virtual cafes, among other measures. Every type of support that helps students interact with their classmates and other groups and professors. But it wasn't enough, because we're talking about psychological needs. And so the demand for psychological help just exploded between March and May. And so we increased the number of long-distance services. And then, as you know, things were moving quickly. We were moving in real time. And so we had to adapt, take the temperature of the situation and put services in place. And for the fall, we will continue in much the same way. I'm in Montreal, and it's a closed place, and there are many more cases. And so we're being very careful about the virus, of course.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ratto?
Well, my responsibilities are less, I think, than many of the folks here who are obviously responsible for many more students. But within my own faculty and within the bachelor's degree program that I ran up until recently, we focused quite a bit on reaching out individually to most of the students. I run primarily graduate faculty, and our undergraduate cohort is very small. So we only have 15 students this year. It was the first year. So we were somewhat insulated from these overall problems. We did find, though, that in fact, the mental health issues that many of the students faced were somehow related to real world issues. And one of the major ones that we encountered were concerns about their plans for work integrated learning. So one thing we did is we doubled down on our focus and resources associated with work integrated learning and made sure that all of our students had the opportunities for co-ops and other forms that really would help them. We found that actually those kinds of real world things solved more problems than just addressing the kind of mental issues themselves.
Great, thank you. Mr. McCauley?
Yes, like my other colleagues, we ramped up significantly right away the mental health supports, not only for our domestic students, but also our international students. We still have about 500 international students that decided to stay and maintain in residence to complete their studies. So we wanted to make sure that they had the services necessary. What I've been most impressed with is how our students themselves, our undergraduates and our graduate students, have self-organized groups, including Zoom dances, including Zoom plays and things like that. So we've been trying to do is to make sure that they have the resources to connect and to help one another.
Thank you. And Mr. Landon, do you have anything else to add with the universities that you represent?
I think perhaps Mr. Martel might answer. I really don't have anything to add. I think they've given very good, a good sort of cross-section of what's happening on the campuses.
Great, thank you. And sort of on a similar theme, I'm wondering if anyone can let us know today if there were some resources or some different external programs available, what would those look like? Where do you see the greatest need that might assist with this? And I'll just open it up for anyone that wants to chime in.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, and I know Philip talked about it as well, in Universities Canada as well as the U15, work integrated learning, I think right now opportunities would be incredibly helpful, as well as upskilling. In other words, individuals who want to develop, for example, micro-credentials to actually transform their life journey or their work trajectory. I think those types of programs would be very beneficial.
Great, thank you. And I think we're out of time.
Unfortunately. So we will now go to MP Assassi. You have the floor for 5 minutes. MP Assassi, you're still on mute.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to all the esteemed witnesses that we've had an opportunity to hear from today. Now, if I could start off with Professor Ratto of the University of Toronto. Professor Ratto, I just wanted to pick up with where MP Lambropoulos actually first started asking you a question, which is you talked at length about how innovation takes place in settings that can be atypical or other mechanisms. And given your passion for seeing collaboration between universities and communities, what would the implications be for universities to make sure that they'd be capable of harnessing closer collaboration with their surrounding communities?
Thanks. I really think that universities could do better to support and value forms of research that result in direct community outcomes. I think, as we've heard already from other colleagues of mine in the university system, community collaboration is something that is highly valued in the university. I think that it is, but not necessarily the direct outcomes that are related to it. And I would love to see universities focusing on those relations and on outcomes in the same way that universities increasingly provide specific support for entrepreneurship and innovation within private business. So the idea of setting up, for example, specific hubs or resources on campus for faculty and communities to meet and engage together in creating real world, or as Mr. Massey said, getting to the streets of the research, I think that would be a great benefit.
Thank you. Now, is there any university that sticks out in your opinion insofar as doing a good job of benchmarking these things and encouraging their faculty and students to do so?
Not any university in Canada. I mean, I'm afraid to say, I think there are universities in the US that are privileged in long histories of having those relationships and focused oftentimes on creating student experiences as well that are really about creating public good, often through things like engineering programs that focus on real world impacts. One that I can think of off the top of my head is Olin College. It's a small engineering college that is very much focused on public outcomes.
Thank you very much for that. Now, if I could turn to another issue, Mr. Landon, we've been hearing that there's been a huge spike in the number of domestic students who intend to actually defer for this academic year. Do you have any sense as to what those numbers are and what the impact would be on Canadian universities?
Well, we don't have a real sense, and I would say that the concern for that was actually happening a little earlier. As far as we see now, enrollment figures for domestic students are leveling up quite nicely, but it was a concern sort of at the beginning of the year. And I think a lot of what happened in the summer semesters, students decided that they could go. And I think all of us have been in the situation of what's going to happen over the next 3 months. We're a little less concerned about that. There still is the challenge of students wanting to defer potentially for a year or only take a few courses. But as I said earlier, it's hard for us to measure that until all the enrollment numbers come in, which will probably be around October. Right now, for domestic students, the numbers are okay. They vary in interesting ways that they didn't before. In Ontario, for example, we have some schools which are oversubscribed and some schools which are undersubscribed compared to previous years. So we're trying to, I don't want to speculate too much as to why that is, but overall the overall enrollment for domestic students seems that it's going to be reasonably healthy this year.
I open it to other witnesses. Dr. McCauley, what has the experience been at your university? And to the extent that there are students deferring, what would the impact on the bottom line be for your university?
We haven't experienced that so far. And we've got mechanisms in place that allow students to defer even if they start the program to make sure that they can continue. One of the challenges that universities are facing is that we have to plan for all these contingencies. We're planning for increased domestic enrollment. We're planning for decreased domestic enrollment, and yet our costs are relatively fixed for that. And so that's one of the challenges that we're facing is the uncertainty and how we can move forward productively to ensure a great student experience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Le prochain tour.
The next turn is for Mr. Simard. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on partnership research for Ms. Fusaro and Mr. Martel. One of the first things that is forgotten by companies is money that goes into research in the context of the economic recovery. When it comes to work in partnership with companies, probably about 1/3 of funding is tied to the outcome. What could be done by the government to support partnership research in particular? You are completely right. These groups were put in place by federally and provincially subsidized groups. And you're talking about partnerships in research with companies. But I would also add with governments. We have important partnerships in research with governments. For example, my colleague was talking about producing facial screens. We also made products with 3D printing. We were very pleased to produce these products to help the whole community that really needed these products. So coming up with more funding is one thing, but maintaining that funding over the long term is very important. We would like to see funding be extended without penalizing researchers. That is essential. And it is also essential for students because we're talking about teams of research here. Because there's not only the senior researcher in a team, it's a full team. There are students from all different degree levels. Go ahead, Denis, I took up all the time. Yes, so research partnerships are extremely important. And that's the case for universities everywhere, but especially in rural regions where we work with companies. In my region, it's the mining sector. Research partnership agreements are very important, especially in the COVID sector, in the COVID context. But you have other sectors, forestry and agriculture, for example, where there are some difficulties, and so it does vary. Thank you.
And we now turn to MP Massé. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't want to ignore all the other witnesses. And so I am going to just pick one. Mr. Martel, you were speaking, so I'll go to you next. And if we have any brief time, I'd invite Ms. Furasaro and Mr. McCauley to quickly jump in. Just wondering what your personal opinion is in terms of the quality of education when we get through this and the how, I guess, maybe the private and public sector will view a degree during COVID-19. Since most stuff is going online. Just kind of curious if you ever thought about that. I'll turn it to you, Mr. Martel, and if there's a little quick time for everybody else to get in, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, in a region like ours, with such a large surface area and so sparsely populated, well, it's been almost 40 years that we've been doing education by distance out of necessity. And the level of quality of our training is esteemed and recognized in the region and everywhere in Quebec and elsewhere in the world because we have partnerships with different places in the world. So I don't see challenges for us because we already have that expertise. It could be a concern for different institutions. It's necessary to react swiftly. And in Quebec, universities share best practices. And the quality will be assured, whether it's training by distance or otherwise.
Ms. Fasaro, I don't know if there's time left.
We offer online degree programs. I think one of the things to emphasize, though, is I think everybody recognizes the Canadian experience is very, very, very important. Having students coming from the world to Canada, having students from different parts of Canada experience all of Canada, I think is really, really important as part of the Canadian experience. There are huge discussions about the commodification of education around the world, but I think that what we value is the Canadian experience.
Thank you. Ms. Fasaro, real quick.
En fait,
Actually, I think my colleague said it all. I could add one aspect. I'm not sure if it's very relevant. Actually, I think everything has already been brought up. You were right when you mentioned that students come to Canada. A great quantity of students come to Canada and to Quebec. We're so privileged. We have a beautiful diversity of students. We must continue to welcome them because this brings richness to everything and everyone.
Thank you very much. And with that, that is the end of our third round. And so I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for being here with us today. Excellent testimony, great questions today. And I think this will really help us in terms of our report for the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So thank you very much for your assistance in that regard. And with that, that ends our time for today. And I now call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.